Very good evening to one and all. Special good evening to the resource person, Dr. Bishwa Kallyan Dash. As part of Know Your IP online lecture series, today we are going to have a presentation by a very young and dynamic law teacher, Dr. Bishwa Kallyan Dash from Kalinga Institute of Law, School of Law. And the resource person has chosen a wonderful topic for discussing with all the participants. When the discussion on intellectual property rights started in the right earnest, sometime in 1990s, especially after 1995, everyone used to talk about neem patent, basmati patent, tulsi patent, pudina patent, pudia cactus, whatnot. Even now, we have number of people questioning us on the efficacy of the IPR system in general, patent system in particular, and questioning the policy of patenting life forms. Anyway, now we have gone too far. It is a point of no return, and there are number of issues to be discussed and highlighted in this particular area, and probably we can't have a better speaker than Dr. Bishwa Kallyan, and I must thank him for accepting our invitation, and it will be my pleasure to give a brief introduction to you. Right now, he is working as an assistant professor in KIIT School of Law, Odisha. I remember I visited this school for a national youth parliament long time back, and I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Samantha. We went to that huge, in fact, dining hall where about 10,000 students are fed every day. It's a great school, and I'm very sure that the same legacy is continuing with dynamic faculty members like Dr. Dash. Mr. Dr. Dash had earlier taught at the Institute of Law, Nirma University, and National Law School, Cuttack, and he has completed his doctorate degree in law from West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences, Kolkata, and he has completely dedicated himself only to the pedagogy and teaching learning process. With about 10 years of experience of doing research and teaching law, and especially courses on varied subjects like cyber laws, forest laws, environmental laws, and constitutional laws, Dr. Dash has contributed number of publications in renowned legal journals, including SCOPUS Index publications. And he is also a very serious researcher. Right now, he is a co-principal investigator on a major research project funded by ICSSR and IMPRESS on the topic of public participation in environmental decision-making process in the state of Gujarat, with a special reference to EIA, that is Environmental Impact Assessment, for 2019 and 21. And he also edited the Nirma University Law Journal, which is one of the UGC recognized double-blind peer review biannually published journal, published by the Nirma University Institute of Law. And he also handled several administrative responsibilities with a greater focus on moot court society, seminars and conferences. And as a young and dynamic teacher and organizer, he has received a number of appreciations and recommendation letters for his organizational capabilities from stalwarts like Professor Dr. Venkat Rao, the former Vice Chancellor of NLSIU, for successfully organizing many events for the institution. And Dr. Dash is currently focusing on the issues relating to cyber laws, AI, one of the emerging area, that is artificial intelligence, constitutional law, right to information, and environmental law. So now I invite formally Dr. Bishwa Kallyan Dash to make his presentation, to be followed by the Q&A session. Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. At this outset, I would like to thank Reddy sir for giving me this opportunity, Irfan sir, and also I can see one known face of mine, Syed Hussain sir. So at this outset, when we are dwelling into the domain of IP issues in bioresources and how are we managing the bioresources through the IPR regime that we have at this present point in time, we need to implore certain factual background with respect to what we are trying to regulate through the intellectual property regulations that we have. The theme of this discussion today is IPR in the process of protecting traditional knowledge in bioresources. Let me give you a brief about a background, or rather a foundation on which we will be developing our discussion today. The first and foremost thing, why do we need to be concerned about bioresources? As Reddy sir said, I have always been into environment and technology, and I have not got a huge grip on intellectual property resources as such, intellectual property rights as such. But today we will be discussing a confluence between IPR and the bioresources being a factor of environment. Today we'll be discussing about interdisciplinarity of the whole discourse that we're talking about. Now, the moment we say so, why are we so concerned about bioresources? Who does manages it? And why are we employing intellectual property rights for its governance, for its management? Where is the dichotomy? And how do we regulate it so that the resources are better served? Now, having said so, let's take for example, the bioresources have always been there with the human being from the very essence when the whole universe have taken into existence. Now, the resource that we talk about have been reduced to a fragmentation by meaning that it must have some economic value at the present point in time. But if we look at the past, if you look at the earlier times, when this bioresources was seen something different than economic values. But at the present point in time, the bioresources have been reduced with a price tag. I'm doing it very brave an effort to make this statement that the bioresources comes up with a price tag at the present point in time. And the moment we say that it is a price tag, then who determines this price? And how do we regulate that the price is not getting inflated and the price is getting intact? It always depends after the whole international legal framework that has come up before us to a point that whenever we have seen to the bioresources has always been looked up to the state to regulate it, to manage it, to protect it, and to preserve it. And we have seen in the international legal framework that whenever we talk about the bioresources, they have always been termed as a resource for humanity and as a resource of humanity. It has never been stated that it belongs to somebody in individuality, or it belongs to somebody as an entity, having absolute control over it. Now, the moment we say so, we come to another discourse, that is proprietizing the whole bioresources as a matter of resource. Now, let me summarize to what I have made an emphasis to establish so far. That is, the bioresources in the earlier past have been considered to be a resource having some utility that is being derived by the people by mere sense of access to it. I used to go to the jungle, pluck out some leaves, I used to eat it, and I used to get healthy. That used to be my association with the bioresources. But the moment we come to the present point in time, me being going to that jungle, plucking that leaf, eating the leaf for getting healthier, is being categorized to have been a prospect of futuristic approach, of future benefits in terms of economic benefits. Now, this change in attitude or this change in outlook have actually brought in the whole process of bioresources and how they have been seen. Now, today, at the present point in time, we are looking at bioresources as one of the resources having an economic viability. And the moment we say economic viability, that means every institution, organization, or the state, they are digging deep into the context of getting maximum benefits out of it. They are trying to utilize as a matter of resource, just like the mines, just like the minerals or the ores. They are also looking at the life forms or the bioresources as one of the sources for them to get benefits out of it. Now, when they go on digging benefits out of it, where does the traditional knowledge comes? Because we have to treat a triangulation point of IPR, bioresources, and traditional knowledge. These are three things, three triangulations that we are going to discuss today. And that is why I said we are going to have an interdisciplinarity approach towards looking at the IPR today, not exclusively an IPR. Now, the moment we say about traditional knowledge, the traditional knowledge is associated with the biological resources, which knowledge is there possessed by the country and applied or used in terms of biological resources as a matter of their practice, which have been there with the human being as a matter of their practices ever since we have understand this context of. And it is an intangible component of the resource itself. The moment we say resource, that means we are associating some price tag to it. That means we are associating some utility that we may possibly derive out of it. And the traditional knowledge that we talk about at this present point in time in the context of bioresources has a potential of being transformed into a commercial opportunity that would provide useful leads for the development and productions, which would be yielding in terms of economic benefits. Now, there is a cross-sectional point that we have to take into consideration. That at one point we are talking about some knowledge that we have been possessing with us through our practices ever since our knowledge has come into practice or come into knowledge. And we have now looking at the possibility of it to be transformed into a commercial practice. And the moment we are transforming these actions to a commercial practice, we are equating that knowledge nothing but with monetary terms. That means we are weighing our knowledge with money. Then, therefore, these benefits must accrue to the person who is creating it and the holders who is actually the beholders of the traditional knowledge. The person who holds the traditional knowledge, who fosters the traditional knowledge, who nurtures the traditional knowledge, they actually should get it. But when we come to the reality goes something different ways. And whenever we talk about the biological resources having associated with the traditional knowledge, they always faces a danger or a threat from two things. One is bioprospecting, the second is biopiracy. You must have definitely heard about these two things over the course of your transactions. Then what is these two terms are? Because we are looking from the economic perspective of bioresources, then we'll come to the IPR angle to the bioresources. And then we'll see how do we regulate it at the present point in time. The moment we talk about bioprospecting, the nomenclature definitely connotes the very essence of it. Bio, which is related to the biological resources, prospecting means looking for a prospect, looking for a possible opportunity, looking for an opportunity for a commercial viability. That means whenever a biological diversity or a biological resource, which is comprising of plants, animals, or microorganisms, when they are being digged deep into for looking their commercial viability, for looking their possibility to be used in a commercial transaction, that is bioprospecting. And who does that? And who would rather do that? The developing countries as well as the developed countries, they are primarily into the bioprospecting. Why? They always look for alternative options of biological resources from where they can derive maximum benefits out of. Because let's say, suppose I have 100 trees from where I am actually getting the benefits that I want today. But tomorrow, I'm looking for a tomorrow. And tomorrow, these 100 trees may not be sufficient for me. And when these trees are not sufficient for me, then I would certainly be looking for something which would be helping me in the future. Then I will go on exploring. Then I will be going on rewindling. And the moment I go on exploring to the resources that would be helpful for me in future, as well as at the present point in time, I cannot negate the present at the same time. That principle is called as bioprospecting. Now, the second context that I said, biopiracy, that biopiracy is nothing but misappropriation of any traditional knowledge for the purpose of seeking exclusive ownership over that knowledge. That means, suppose I can see Shrikar. Shrikar is a person who holds some knowledge, and I'm a person who is looking for taking an advantage of that particular knowledge that Shrikar holds. Now, how can I do that? Or how can I take advantage of the same? I can do that by alluring him, by giving him some benefits, or by getting it transferred to me if he wishes to sell it off to me. But the point here is, the moment I say Shrikar holds a traditional knowledge, the traditional knowledge may be belonging to him, to the community, or to the community at large to which he belongs to. But here, I'm trying to change the proprietorship notion by means of law by seeking an exclusive right over the property that Shrikar holds. And that is where the exclusivity terms classifies the knowledge that is associated with the bioresources. Because if you understand, if you do remember, I said in the very beginning only that whenever we talk about bioresources, these are resources which belong to the people at large. And the benefit of these are to be derived by the people at large. That means every person has a say over the resource which is coming out of the biological diversity or the biological resource pool of ours. But at the same time, when we reduce this community angle to that of an exclusivity angle, that means one person would be the owner of that particular knowledge, one person would be completely dominating the factors of that knowledge associated with the biodiversity. And therefore, the process through which the rights to those biological resources or the genetic resources or the traditional knowledge are assumed, they are meant to be exploiting those resources for commercial gains. And this process is known as biopiracy. You are trying to get it to yourself, and exploit it for money. The moment you are circumventing this sphere and get those biological resources to your control so that you can commercialize it and you can get benefits out of it, that very moment you are eroding the whole essence of biological resources which have been in practice. That is, it is a common property and it is meant for the whole people, and the traditional knowledge holders are the sole proprietor of that knowledge. And these are the two terms which the biological prospecting and biological piracy, or bioprospecting and biopiracy, are the two phenomena which have been involved in the process of management of biological resources, rather making it vulnerable in terms of commercial gains. Now, coming to the fact, if somebody is doing biological prospecting, if somebody is doing biological piracy, what is wrong? Ultimately, it is for money, and the money would be circulating in the economy, and it will ultimately come as a benefit to the people. And being a developed country or being a developing state, the state has absolute or the sovereign authority to do so. Then where is the problem? Now, the problem lies in what quantum? The first question: what is the legal status of commoditizing a biological resources so that a person can exclusively enjoy absolute authority over it? Because the moment we say commoditizing, it means I can enjoy absolute authority over the resource, I can make it beneficial factor, I can gain commercial benefits out of it, and thereby I would be allowed to use it, because ultimately I'm gaining the benefit for the state. But what is the legal status? Is there any law which is regulating the whole aspect? Or can anyone go and just pick up something from the resource pool and start eliminating everything else and gain benefit out of it? Or is there any affirmative control over it? That is the first issue. The second issue is understanding the exact boundaries of biopiracy or bioprospecting. Within what limits you are allowed. Because I'll tell you one factor or one differentiation here. Let's say I'm looking for having an access to a biological resource. The biological resource is something which belongs to the people at large. That's what I said, that has always been a common practice. And the state has the authority to regulate it under the public trust doctrine. Now, when I'm trying to access it, would my purpose, would my intention be of any excuse for which I would be avail with an access to the resource? If I'm going for a commercial benefit, then certainly the way I will be treated or my access request will be treated is definitely going to be different as to or as compared to a person who is like, okay, I want to study over the resource, I want to know more about the resource, I want to see to the compositions of the resource, I want to do a scientific experimentation on the resource. These are the two differentiating factors which definitely denotes that the boundaries needs to be established. Otherwise, every person can commercially exploit the biological resources. Now the factor comes. We have gradually grown with technological advancements. And the moment we employ technology to the utilization and access of biological resources, it certainly poses a threat to the very existence of the resources as a resource itself. Just like bioinformatics, just like proteomics, just like genetic engineering, or just like synthetic biology. These are the technological advancement which says ultimately that which are the resources which are beneficial for you, and you know which are the resources you need to exploit to get a commercial gain. Now that is something which needs a legal answer. for not exhibiting the biological resources from getting into depletions or getting into extinction. Then how do we regulate it? How do we manage it? And for managing this whole point, we have to take inference from the TRIPS, trade-related aspects of intellectual property. Right. Now, TRIPS, when it tries to regulate the bioresources or the biodiversity, Article 27 of the TRIPS agreement comes as a rescue. Article 27 casts 4 responsibilities, cast 4 obligations on the state how they would be managing or regulating the biological resources and their usages, because every person is now coming down to use the biological resources for inventing something, for using something new, or for coming up with something new, so that they can go with the intellectual property protection by which they would be getting an exclusive proprietary right over it. And the moment they get this exclusive proprietary right over it, they have the options of exploiting it commercially. And that is where Article 27 of the TRIPS comes into picture, which suggests 4 measures to be taken by the states. What are the 4 measures? The first measure, that it allows patents on everything. And this would include all materials and all forms of technology. Reddy sir in the introduction have mentioned about this fact that there used to be a time when anything and everything was supposed to be getting into the mandate of patents. Now the problem here is, if we go on patenting everything and anything, which thereby would be causing a trouble to subsequent access because you are providing an exclusivity to some person, then it will culminate in exploitation. Exploitation in the market when there would be a public necessity. Now, that is where the first and foremost mechanism which was asked under Article 27 was nothing but to check to the point that whether 27 allows for the patenting on everything and any forms that would also include the material and all forms of technology can also be patented. Any technology which is helping you in terms of exploiting the biological resources also are patentable. Now, the second point which came up as a matter of Article 27 was to exclude plants, animals and biological processes, but not plant varieties. This means that whereas naturally found plants and animals and natural biological processes by which they are created could be excluded from patents, crops, varieties could not. Just like if I'm going to the nature, and found something in the nature, those natural forms of the life or the living organisms cannot be patented. That's what the second condition says. But anything which is coming out of it as a matter of employment of technical know-how, those inventions can be patented. That means I cannot get a patent over a maize plant which I'm getting from the nature, but if I get an access to the maize plant and do some permutation and combination and comes up with a new variety of a maize plant, then definitely I can get a patent over it. That's what 27 does allow. The third proposition which the TRIPS under Article 27 posed was to exclude plants and animals and biological processes from patenting and to introduce a special sui generis system for the protection of the plant varieties. And the sui generis system allows the country to create a system of their own choice that would enable the minimum protection that is to be agreed by the WTO under the TRIPS agreement. Now, this is a phenomenal path-breaking system which all the developing countries have gathered a momentum to. What they said, either you completely prohibit, or you go for any subsidiary permissions, or you go for coming up with a national legislative framework or a sui generis system of your own, of your indigenous system, which would be allowing you to regulate the patenting of these lives and life forms. Now, which of the developing country do you think would deny to this option? The moment we say that the countries have started looking forward to this option only, they even didn't bother about the fourth point, which talked about to exclude plants and animals and essential biological processes from patenting, but not plant varieties, to provide a sui generis system. Later on we came up with the above convention and the PPVFR Act, and everything came up at a subsequent period in time. But the point here is, most of the developing countries had chosen the option 3, the sui generis system. Now, the sui generis system of protection is the one which was adopted particularly with the subject matter, where the countries wanted to come up with their own mechanism how they want the patenting to be done in the lives and life forms. Now, in some part, the developed countries said, no, let's adopt the UPOF convention, International Union of Protection of New Varieties of Plants, the UPOF system, which is to be considered as a sui generis system. We will not be taking a stricter mandate of Article 27 of the TRIPS, but rather we would go to the UPOF convention. Now, who were pitching for this? You need to understand the geopolitics which was happening during this point in time, because that shows where the legislative framework is heading to. Now, most of the developing countries, they were saying that let OPOF be considered. You need to understand the geopolitics which was regulating the whole conditionalities back then. What was the geopolitics? The developing countries were saying, let's accept UPOF to be the foundational sui generis system for allowing us, or for regulating the life forms and their patenting. But the developing countries were saying, no, let's not accept UPOF to be the condition precedent. Let's take one second. Let's make our own sui generis system, which would be regulating the whole aspects of the plants and plant varieties and the patent with respect to the SAT. Now, consolidating the whole 27 for you, it is talking about few factors. The first, plants and animals and other microorganisms are to be excluded from patenting. Second, it's saying that essentially biological processes for the production of plants and animals other than non-biological microorganism process are allowed, but the members shall provide for the protection of plant varieties either by patents or by an effective sui generis system, or the combination of both the two. And lastly, it says that the microorganisms must be patentable, but plants and animals do not have to be. That means the original form of life and life forms needs to be protected, but any aberrations on top of it can be a subject matter of patent. Now, having said that, there are certain few hidden questions which got surfaced, which was not having an answer in the Article 27 of the TRIPS that we are referring to. What is that? That the first question was, what about the genetic and the biochemical processes? Suppose some person is doing some exercise through a scientific method, and a plant genetic material or a compound of the genetic material which has been taken out of the animal, can that be patented? Since they are not expressly excluded, patent must in principle be made available for this. because the compounds are not explicitly excluded, because 27 is talking about life and life form. It is not talking about any harmonious combination of the life forms. Then how would you be regulating that? And what is the condition precedent for patent? The condition precedent, because why are we questioning about the condition precedent? The condition precedent here, since they are not expressly excluded by the TRIPS, the patent must be allowed in principle. And what is the basic three requisites for allowing a patent on principle is, first, novelty. There must be an inclusion of inventive step, and there must be a industrial application. If these are the 3 points that we need to think of, that we need to talk of, then should we allow a patent over the life forms, which is a compound measure which has been extracted out of an inclusion of a scientific method? Because you are silent about the exclusions or extractions by now. I'm referring to that point in time when 27 came into picture. By then, when it was not expressly dealing with the facts of the patenting processes, then how do we deal with it? Now, subsequent few questions came up. We'll answer one by one, but let me fathom all the questions once and all. The next question came up was, do these requirements that we are referring to, that it must have a novelty, it must have inventive step, it must have an industrial application, that resources existing in nature cannot be patented at all? But with practice, what we have seen is, in Europe and in North America, which have the most experience in the patenting of such natural substances, when the developed countries, they started exploiting the natural substances, how could the developing countries run behind? Now, coming up with a sui generis system for patenting and the life forms, because you have the patent regulations at place and you saying that life forms cannot be patented, 27 came into picture. But on the contrary, when it is applied, the patent laws have been applied. The patent laws are being applied. The European and the North American countries have randomly allowing these life forms to be patented, the process to be patented. And there has never been a blanket exclusion of inventions simply because they were not human made. They were all inclusions of technology, and there is no human interventions out there. Then in that case, how can you exclude the patent of such products which are coming out of the biological resources, or which are the bioresources, but are being subject matter of the patent because of the 3 basic requirements which it is satisfying to? Let me give you an example. Adrenaline. Adrenaline was first presented in the year 1903 or somewhere at that time. And out of adrenaline, we came up with the insulin. Adrenaline supplements, then insulin supplements, we came up with those factors and we came up with the patenting of those drugs. Now the point, insulin came somewhere in 23, 25 or something like that. But the whole point of discussion here was, for good amount of time till 70s or late 70s, the scope of patent protection was extended first to the microorganisms, and then to the DNA, then to the DNA sequencing, then to the plants, and then to the animals. We have seen a gradual growth in terms of the patent protection. And the moment we saw about, or we say about the patent or the patent protection, we are talking about having an exclusive right over the particular resource, and it is under the dominion of the patent holder for getting commercial benefits out of it. Now, but the whole dichotomy here is, the moment we talk about that, yes, we are to go for a patent, we have to exploit something as a matter of biological resource. The whole factor depends on whether it is a discovery or an invention. Whether something new have been discovered or invented, what is the differentiation between both the two? If you understand the differentiation, its application on the biological resources will be smooth for us. The first is, while you cannot claim as an invention something as it occurs in the nature, it is often possible to do so if you extract it from the nature. I cannot say that insulin just came today, but if insulin was there and I extracted out of the nature, then I can say it is an invention. The moment I extract it, I'm certainly not extracting it for keeping it in my closets. I'm extracting it so that I can give it to the market, I can give it to the manufacturing unit, I can give it to a manufacturing of industrial application would come into place. A more certain route would be to change the substance or the life form in some way such that by adding something to it, subtracting something from it, or by synergizing, mixing with something else like permutations and combinations, a structural modifications happen, then we say this has been a discovery. Now, the point of call here is, the moment we talk about biological resources, we are doing all these permutations and combinations. But this biomechanical or biochemical processes wherein we are looking for the permutations and combinations and trying to come something new, is it so a case that it appears for a possibility for some jurisdiction to get it patented, just like Europe and Latin American countries are doing, and some countries like India will not be doing it? But both the countries do know that it has a commercial viability. Now, the point here is, how do we then protect? Where is the dilemma? The developing countries are patenting it, but the developed countries are patenting it. The developing countries are still in a dilemma that whether we have a sui generis system first and then try to exploit it, or we accept APOF to be one of the sui generis model and accept the patenting processes thereof with respect to the biological diversity. What should be our approach? Now, in this regard, what we are to see here is, the dilemma is of granting patents on isolated biochemical substances or organisms that violates the sovereign right of the state, and the patent constitute a proprietary claim over it. That means if one component of biochemical or biosubstance we are referring to, exclusively on it, we cannot provide any exclusive rights or IPR rights over it or patent rights over it. You cannot claim proprietary claims over any single molecule or particulate of the biological substance. But it is impossible at the same time to patent something that is existing in nature. Therefore, there can be no violations of sovereignty unless a patent is improperly awarded. The sovereign authority here, or the concept of sovereignty, says that the biological resources belong to the sovereign. The sovereign have already made it clear, or the state has made it clear through its legal prescriptions, that single molecular mechanisms you cannot patent, lives and life forms in the nature cannot be patented. Now, this shows the dilemma. What about the developed countries? Because they are also in the process of getting patent over the life forms. So we would be lagging behind. And if you are lagging behind, how are we going to compete with the market? And that is where the public order was being questioned in TRIPS, which they said ordre public and morality, the public order and morality. It is not defined under the TRIPS agreement itself, though it does not explicitly banks on any point with respect to what constitutes a public order what constitutes moral values for the public in terms of patenting the life forms. Now, the members, as per the TRIPS conditions, are expected that they may exclude from patentability of inventions the prevention within their territory of the commercial exploitation of which is necessary to protect the public order and morality, including to protect human, animal, plants, and lives and life forms, and to avoid serious prejudice to the environment, and provided that such exclusions is not made merely because of exploitation is prohibited in their law. Now, this is where the context of sustainability comes into picture, because most of the states are looking into the fact that sustainably they would be using the resources. But what about the economics? The very first proposition with which we started this session today. Because the states look this as a viable factor for development. So if there is a commercial angle attached to this, then certainly they would be trying to get additive advantage of it. And the moment they are looking for gaining a benefit out of it, then why would the state not explore this opportunity? And merely because it is prohibited by their law, should they be excluding the exploitation, or should they be excluding their access to these biological resources? And how about the contrast that is happening between the developed countries and the developing countries in this regard? Now, let's see Article 27, the text here. The text says, patent shall be available for any inventions, whether products or processes, in all fields of technology, provided that they are new, involve an inventive step, or capable of industrial application, subject to paragraph 4 of Article 65, subject to Article 65, Article 70. And for this, the patent shall be available in the patent's right enjoyable without discrimination as to the place of invention, the field of technology, or whether the products are imported or locally produced. It's not talking anything about how it is being accrued. If it is new, if it is having an inventive step, or if it is having an industrial application, you can allow for patents. Now the point comes, but when the members are getting into the process of patenting of any biological resource or the process of biological resource where it is involved, they may exclude the patentability inventions and the prevention within their territory of the commercial exploitations of which is necessary to protect the public order and morality, including the protection of human being life and life forms. And so does Article 27, Clause 3, which also induced into the mechanism or the ambit of it, which talks about that diagnostic, therapeutic, surgical methods of treatments of human and animals, plants and animals and other than microorganisms, and essential biological processes for the production of the plants and animals or non-biological microbiological processes. These are the terms which has the combination thereof can be patented. Not exclusively they can be patented, but a combination of thereof can be patented. Now, we'll come down to 28 in a later point in time. But let's understand, where are the issues? Where are the issues? The issue first is conducting an intellectual property assessment. That when we are talking about providing an exclusive right over a biological resource, whether we are actually conducting an assessment of the prerequisites of the TRIPS or any sui generis system that is available in the country. That means no life forms in its molecular level are being allowed to get patented. Rather, its invented portions are being allowed to get patented. That is the first issue that we have to look forward to. If we at all are willing to sustainably use the biological resources. The second question or the second issue is assessing the subject matter to be documented. I'll tell you something. The USPTO, United States Patents and Trademark Office, has started for the first time looking into the aspect of dissemination of information, that which are the lives and the life forms which are excluded and which has been given a patent over it. And similarly, on that line, we have come up with something called the TKDL, Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, which is talking about all this context. Those are necessarily needed to be documented before even you are doing for an IP assessment, or before even you are going for an invention, or before you are even asking for an access to hold that invention. So this is documentation is the second primary concern that we have to be concerned about when we are talking about intellectual property protection in terms of biological resources. Third, the assessing of applicable IP laws. I'll tell you something which has happened recently. We always have looked into it. Suppose there is a genetic property which is found in India. The genetic property in isolation cannot be patented, but the genetic property needs an access. Yes, I'll come to that question. The moment we talk about that the genetic property, we have specific regulations which subsequent to TRIPS we have evolved. How and what is that? We have come up with the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, and subsequent to that a sui generis system that we have come up with, that is the Biological Diversity Act and the rules thereof. The Biodiversity Act of 2002 and the rules thereof of 2010 has actually culminated into a great deal of debate. Who are the persons need to get an access to? How they would be getting an access to? What are the forms they would have to be filling in to get an access to the biological resources? What are the factors that they need to see while they are having an access to the biological resources? What are the compliances that they need to make while they are accessing the biological resources? And what ulteriorly they have to do once they have completed their inventions with respect to any biological resources. Now, these are the primary factors where we have to see what are the applicable laws in terms of intellectual property protection which you would be seeking subsequently. What are the laws? You have patent laws, you have biodiversity laws, you have environmental laws, you have hazardous waste substance laws, you have multiple laws with respect to protecting your IP, or with respect to consonance or conciling with respect to the protection of your intellectual property. And that is the third question definitely we have to see. And lastly, the developing of an IP management strategy with regards to the compliances that we are looking forward to. Now, having said that, the moment we talk about that, the whole point of discussions of traditional knowledge have gathered a momentum in our country that we have come up with our own laws. But have they been sufficient enough to answer to the pressing issues that we have been facing from time to time? I'll give you a few examples because that is one of the questions which is being raised in the chat box. Eventually, I was about to answer to that. Let me tell you something. We said that life forms in its molecular level cannot be patented, cannot be given any specific protection. But what about the traditional knowledge? The traditional knowledge is something which is there with the persons or group of persons ever since them. There is a reasonable period in time within which they have been practicing, professing, and propagating that knowledge. They are the sole bearers of that particular knowledge. So they have the ultimate authority to get the benefits thereof. Even the TRIPS also said the same thing. But the whole factor came into the fathom. We'll be taking few case studies today to look into how CBD and the intellectual property laws are getting tuned along. The Colgate case, okay, the first. The Colgate being an US company, being the world leader in the toothpaste manufacturing, they started with a campaign with respect to a toothpaste or a cleansing powder. And they claim that they are the largest producer of toothpaste, and they patented the tooth cleansing powder. Now, it became an American household product with the composition that they claim to be indigenous, and they got a patent over it. Now, the whole point here was they claim that it is the red herbal which is actually causing the benefits to them, which is actually bringing the benefits to them, which is their own brainchild, which is their own property to which they got a patent to. But many Indian activists, they started claiming that this is a knowledge which is there with us ever since our forefathers have given us this knowledge. And we have got this knowledge, and this is very traditional and embedded to us. And this knowledge is not something new. And this knowledge they have not invented any way thereof, and for which we have to get records out of it. Now, however, the whole point of discussion here was its patent filing argues that the use of red oxide iron, which is less abrasive than ingredients in the traditional toothpaste, is new, that they have added some component which is new to the traditional knowledge, for which this is a new knowledge. But according to Colgate, the old recipe has become new, and through this, the legal contraption of the American company intends to pay a royalty. And this is what the argument from all the other people, that they are just trying to dwell with something which is not necessary, which is not required. And something adding to the free component is not something creating new. Just like I want water, I don't want anything else. If I add something to it, then it is not necessary for me. That doesn't mean that I claim water to be mine. And India, in the process of creating 34 million of web page, has now established the TKDL, Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, which talks about these are the kinds of biopiracy which happens in terms of appropriating. I'm strictly not using the word misappropriating as of now, but appropriating the knowledge that we do hold in terms of our traditional knowledge and getting benefits out of it. And samely, the matter is went on for discussions, and you know the results out of it. But the whole point of discussion is, you talk about the patents, you talk about turmeric, you talk about neem, you talk about Colgate. These are some of the points that we have to talk about. Or you talk about Ayuska. Everything is now reduced to the point of life and life forms and its patentability. The conventions of biodiversity, to which 150 government leaders are parties to, under which Article 8J of the CBD, it deals with the process of protecting traditional knowledge and associated with biological resources, whose main objective is to conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of the components of biological diversity, and fair and equitable sharing of benefits of the biological resources and its uses. It does not allow you to exclusively proprietizing the biological resources, rather to use it diligently with the due process which has been established and claim benefits thereof, not through the exclusive matter, but with the regulated framework that we have. And similarly, the moment we say that we have parallel wings being created and constituted separately to deal with the intellectual property and its inclusion within the ambit of biological resources, but it objectified that First of all, you need to mandate that this is a property which belongs to the people. Secondly, you have to see that these conservations of the biological resources are required. Third, you have to make it sure that you are sustainably using it. And fourth, that you have to fair and equitably utilize it, and any benefits that you are getting it, you should share it amongst the peer. And that is how the whole ABS mechanisms came into picture. Access and benefit sharing mechanism has come into picture. Now in India, coming back to the Indian circumstances, we have the National Biological Diversity Act, the Patents Act, and the Protection of Plants, Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act, PPVFR, the Geographical Indications Act. Everything, we have a cumulative requirement. You have a cumulative structure. But when we see to the Patents Act, which got amended in the year 2005, it talks about which makes biological processes as patentable, including biochemical, biotechnological, or biomicrobiological processes. That means microorganisms are patentable, and for patent or biological material, specifications must disclose the source and the geographical origin of the biological material. This is in consonance with the biological resources rules, which says the moment you are taking any microorganisms or biological resource from the nature for your study, and you get a licensing process subsequently done, the moment you are filing for a patent or any subsequent proceedings thereof, you have to disclose the source, the amount, the volume, the nature, and the context in which the biological resource had been obtained. And this provides you are disclosing which biological resource you have used, whether you have used it sustainably or not, it would be establishing the same. But at the same time, the amended act to the patents legislation says that if you fail to disclose such criteria as required, that would be a valid ground for opposition to your patent. And a patent can be refused when you are giving wrong information about the source, or you are not, or you are denying to give information about the source. And so are the other cases also. When we come down to the point of access and benefit sharing, this has come up with a huge blow in the recent times. When you talk about the Divya Pharma case, the recent one which has happened from Ramdev's company, Baba Ramdev's company, the Divya Pharma's case, when they were using incessant amount of biological resources for their plants and manufacturing and productions. Now the whole process is, they are saying everyone have been using traditional knowledge for the betterment of human life, and so does the Veds and Hakims. But the traditional knowledge of Ayurveda has now been industrialized, and now we are doing multiple combinations and permutations to get the benefits out of it. But the point here is, the moment we talk about TRIPS, the moment we talk about the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, it ultimately tries to get the benefits in its true essence to the people who are the beholder of that knowledge. It's those people who are actually getting those knowledge alive. They are bringing it to the market. They are practicing it. They are professing it. And the moment a commercial viability angle comes into picture, that does not mean that you would be taking away their prospects by doing a biopiracy with respect to the same. And therefore, the mechanism here has established, starting from the applicant when he intends to have an access to the biological resource, to the National Biodiversity Authority, to the State Biodiversity Board, to the Biodiversity Management Committees, and to the PBRs, the records which are being maintained by the Biodiversity Management Committee, of all the necessary details of a plant's biodiversity or biological resource needs to be harmoniously taken into consideration, and then only you can think of any exclusivity of right over it. Because at the end, I would just like to say something which I started with. The point we say that biological resources are properties belong to the people. no exclusivity right can be accorded to that proprietorship because it is for the people and for the benefit of them. And the moment intellectual property right comes in, it nothing but have tried to secure a balance between community interest vis-a-vis private interest, wherein the patent legislations and the trademark legislation or GI legislations have been amended with respect to harmonizing these two interests to look for a progressive future. That would be all.
Thank you, sir, for the nice lecture on bioresources and their protection through the mechanism of IP, both under the Biodiversity Act and also through the traditional knowledge defensive mechanism that is available to us. Now, I request our chair professor, Professor G.V. Reddy, sir, to please give his remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan, and a big thank you to Dr. Bishwa Kallyan. In fact, your style of presentation is really impressive, and I have seen it in a very few young, and upcoming professors nowadays. The clarity, the lucidity, and the simplicity, they're really amazing. Now, as far as the lecture has been concerned, or is concerned, all of you have enjoyed the in-depth knowledge acquired by Dr. Das. And there are a number of issues as far as these, IPRs in biodiversity are concerned. When you are flying, and especially when you are flying through Northeast, suppose you are flying to Kolkata or some other place, you see so much greenery, so many forests, and so much biodiversity, which reminds us that India is one of the 8 mega biodiverse countries with abundance of, traditional knowledge in biological resources. And let me also, share one small experience. I had the good fortune of being a research advisor to a faculty member, Dr. Usha Swaminathan in VIT, Vellore Institute of Technology University in Vellore. That was on traditional medicinal practices. And that was an empirical study. In the questionnaire, which was applied to the Vaidyas and others who are the traditional holders of the knowledge, and they use only the plant resources, either for curing a snake bite or something else. They were mentioning that they are not really able to continue that tradition for 2 reasons. One is that the younger generation is not ready to take up the same practices, because they find that there is no future. There's no future. The second one is that certainly the multinational corporations are poachers. They are ready to give 1,000 rupees, as said by Dr. Bishwa Kallyan. But many of the stakeholders are not so gullible nowadays. They're trying to protect, but the protest or the defense is very weak and meek. This is one aspect. So it's not only the TKDL. I remember in 2010, Mr. Kamal Nath was the, in fact, Commerce Minister, and he informed Parliament that an entry in the TKDL, which was revealed by our TKDL to European Patent Office in respect of a patent application for a Pudina-based product, mint product, and that led to withdrawal of the patent application. After that, I have not come across, many such instances where TKDL has been used, constructively. Be that as it may, now the point is, there are a number of, in fact, options left open to the government and strengthening of BMCs, then, in fact, initiating the actual, the process of ABS, Sanjeevani or Jeevani experiment failed in Kerala. You know that though GI was not registered, but an attempt was made. And we don't have any NGOs working for the interest of all these traditional knowledge holders. But nonetheless, number of inputs have been given by Dr. Das. We must thank you. and we hope that you would be continuing to associate yourself with the activities of DPIIT Chair, Osmania University. And I also thank all the other members. Now, for a formal vote of thanks, over to Mr. Srinivas Rao.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Very good evening, sir. Good evening, IPR Chair Professor, the organizing team, and all the participants. I would like to take the privilege of to host the vote of thanks on behalf of DPIIT IPR Chair here. Generally, when we talk about IPR, usually people who are not acquainted with this subject would relate it with either to patents, trademarks, and mostly and widely with copyrights. Overall, it becomes less relatable to bioresources when we talk about these kind of subjects. So, sir, today's lecture, which was been delivered today, was very fine-tuned between the bioresources and traditional knowledge, which is popularly known as TK. And we see that there are few questions which were related to TKDL as well. So, as you mentioned, sir, the process of discovery itself is amazing, which is the first of discovery of traditional knowledge and then protecting your bioresources. That itself is a journey, and the one who does this, he really enjoys the flavor of IPR. No doubt, more research and development and exploration is required in this subject. That's a matter of fact. And it's a matter of fact that we have forest departments in every state. I think we need to empower them, the departments in tune to TK and the bioresources. If this knowledge is being shared with them, I think most of the issues related to bioresources can be sorted out. Your lecture is also a good continuation to our episode 7 lecture from Dr. Gargi Chakraborty, who she delivered a lecture on the topic of effectiveness of a plant variety protection in India. After this, our viewers will get a clear message to protect the need of bioresources protection and protection of traditional knowledge. And I'm sure that the present group and viewers on the YouTube channel will also help this in disseminating the information to more masses, which would be sourced from your today's lecture, sir. So by your lecture, we have completed this 9th episode of our weekly lecture series, which is known as Know Your IP, in which is one of the DPIIT IPR-Chair OU IP properties. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my entire team, every viewer and participants for continuously supporting us. And before leaving this meet, I would also like to request all the participants to please ensure to subscribe to our channel in case if you have not done yet. And on behalf of DPIIT IPR Chair and the team, thank you everyone. We will meet again, once again, with another interesting topic. Until the next episode, on behalf of DPIIT IPR Chair, OU, thank you. See you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Good evening.